Alrighty, and we are rolling on another episode of the Love That podcast. I want to thank each and every one of you for listening into another episode. I am your host, Diego. Last week we had a discussion about colorism in Mexico and broadly speaking about the colorism experience globally from my specific historical and cultural context coming from Latinx background and what colorism looks like and its roots and ties to anti-blackness and how that permeates through cultures and is disseminated and then hidden behind less extreme versions of anti-blackness, which is colorism. I think that overall the conversation was probably something that a lot of Latin American people probably weren't expecting, or probably not something that they would typically consider. But hopefully keeping in mind that Mexico is in of itself going through some sort of cultural reckoning with the idea of identity and reconciling with its colonial history and its very racist history as well, not just with indigenous people, but also black people and other cultures and ethnicities within Mexico that are part of the larger Mexican population. This is definitely a conversation that I would love to continue on and also come back to at a later date. Once again, hopefully with another guest or with somebody else that can shine a light on or bring something forward that I didn't mention before. On that note, I do want to remind everybody that we do have an Instagram that everybody can be following. You get notifications about when the new episode drops, as well as if you're already subscribed on Spotify, you should be getting alerts about when a new episode has been uploaded. But once again, the Instagram handle is at the Love That Pod, POD. Once again, that's the Love That Pod on Instagram. So go ahead and like, share, follow, subscribe on Spotify, engage with the show, questions, comments. I've been getting a lot of messages, which is really nice, and I want to thank everybody for reaching out and saying that they love the episodes and they love the format or they love the cover. All of the compliments, I take them, and I really, really thank each and everybody for reaching out. So yeah, I think that's enough intro. Let's go ahead and dive into today's topic. So for today's discussion, I actually wanted to have a conversation about a ongoing and developing story that's happening in Cuba, and that is the protests that the people are marching against policies, regulations, and attitudes of the government and police officials against their own citizens in Cuba. Cuba currently is facing an economic crisis, a food shortage, and a resurgence of the COVID-19 virus with its many different variants, and a lack of vaccines that is not helping them fight their curve. People are showing up to these protests from all walks of life. I've seen women and children, men of all ages, people from all backgrounds coming together, helping one another in a seemingly cohesive manner to try to help the collective of Cuba get beyond the crises that they're experiencing. I've seen priests there denouncing the brutality with which the protesters are being met, because they are being released onto protesters who at the end of the day are saying what the government is doing is not enough or is purposely not enough, and they're being met with aggression by the authorities for their beliefs and for going against the believed collective, which is the government in this case, when the actual people, the citizens, all pretty much share the common feeling that Cuba needs to be doing more for its people. Now, I wanted to discuss this not only because I feel like it's important for us here in the States to have a better understanding of how the world is dealing with things. I know a lot of us here in the US just assume we got the double vaccination or we got the one shot and we're like good and life is just going to keep on moving on. And in a lot of cases that's true, but for a lot of different people and for people all across the world, they're not in that same position. We are very much in a privileged position, and Cuba is showing us evidence of that, you know? I feel that raising awareness about what others are going through across the world will give us a better perspective on how to not only tackle the issues in our lives, but also lend a helping hand where we can in ways that the Cuban people deem it fit. I feel that currently it's a little bit too early to say one way or another what should be done. I know that I think that, how should I say this? While I am not wanting to take the tragedy of the Cuban people as a way to segue into something, I do think that it's important to notice who actually does this and for what reason. I was going through Twitter because I was trying to see what the Cuban people were saying, what news outlets were reporting. Currently, there is believed to be over 100 people that are missing as a result of their interactions with the police, and the UN has intervened and released a statement saying that they want the people to be released to their families. I think that the Cuban government's strong arming of its own people is very reminiscent and should be I don't know if not surprising is the word, but I feel like it shouldn't be something so shocking to us here in the States, because it's the same thing. Police forces across the world, that is how they deal with things. It's not de-escalation. It's always an escalation, and it's always an attempt to switch whatever is the perceived power dynamic. That's just how police forces work. We're not talking about de-escalation squads. You know, that's not how they work. That's not what the police's history is founded upon. And if you have any issues about that, you can, do your own research and find out. But I was looking through all of this and seeing the different talking points, kind of all alluding to the fact that, this country is a socialist country and is ran by socialism and experiences this level of poverty, this level of hardships, the health crises, the food shortages, all this different kind of stuff, the standard of living in comparison to other countries, all that kind of stuff, using it as talking points for why here in America we have such a great setup. And while on its face value, I won't negate the fact that our lived experience here in the United States is a lot better than it is in many places across the world, but that comes at a price. It's worth noting that our privileges come at a price to somebody else. Somebody in capitalism, somebody is always paying. There's an expression in Spanish that, pagar los platos rotos, the rotten plates. You pay for the rotten plates, or you pay for the broken plates. Like, somebody's always going to be cleaning up the mess, quote unquote, or picking up the slack. So, we get to go to the 99-cent store and buy it up, but at the same time, somebody's getting shortchanged for labor, for packaging, exposure to all these different kinds of things, and that can be a whole other conversation, capitalism and all its workings. What I'm trying to segue into is I was seeing a lot online about specifically Fox News, Republicans, senators and politicians, and just, I guess, political commentators using that as a point to, sending out prayers to Cuba and everything like that. But positioning themselves as we should be so proud and thankful for what we have here in the United States, because under a quote unquote representative democracy, or a perceived fair electoral process, and government that represents its people and values of freedom and prosperity, all of those topics, I mean, while yes, the idea of freedom and representative democracy, it all sounds nice, we all have to admit that here in the United States, it's not perfect. It never is perfect. And I think the larger overarching conversation is, government is messy, government is hard, government is filled with good people and bad people, and some really bad people and some really good people. Not everything is like cutthroat this way or that way, a rigid binary. It's a lot of middle ground. And I think that the biggest takeaway as people from the outside looking in, if you don't have any, cultural ties or any ties period to Cuba or its people, is that people across the world all want the same thing. They want equal opportunities, equal access, and equal rights to just live freely, and without fear and oppression of daily life. I sympathize greatly with the people of Cuba. I don't know a lot about the history. I know that it's a very complicated one. And also in the US, we have a long history of muddying the significance and muddying the reality of concepts in history that we don't think would put the United States in the best light. The US has a long history of being an anti-socialist, anti-capitalist, anti-Marxist society, using the Western ideology and the Western expansion theories of like quote unquote liberties and representational government as the way to go in this new globalized society. Thinking that the way that the U.S. does policy and does government, the way that we do everything should be the standard from which the globe moves. It's not realistic, for one, because the globe is made up of many cultures, many ethnicities, many people. We're not all different. We don't all hold the same cultural values and ideals, and that's okay. I think that we obviously share a planet, but we're all, global citizens. And I think that's more so from the angle that we should be meeting this, that these people want the same thing that every one of us want in this country, and that people have been fighting for in this country since its inception, fighting for equal access to healthcare, to livelihood, to life. What do they say? Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. These people are not getting it in Cuba, they are saying. But it's also worth noting that people in the United States also are not getting it. It's not a situation for us to say that we are better off because of our ideas about government. I think it's more so about just being grateful about the position that we've been put in and the position that we find ourselves in, and doing what we can to help others move forward. I don't know what is the best way for Cuba to move forward. I think only the Cuban people can let it be known what they feel is the best. I know that recently the UN put up to vote the sanctions that the US has had on Cuba for decades. Basically, they reached a almost unanimous vote about removing, the EU voted to remove the sanctions that the US had placed on Cuba, and it was, I think, a 162 to 2 or like a 160 to 2 vote. And the only two countries in the EU that voted against the sanctions being lifted were the United States and Israel. So once again, it's showing you that the US has vested interests in certain countries staying the way that they are. And at what point is it not their own government's fault, but other people intervening, other countries, other superpowers? And not to say that we're better than the Cuban people, it's just that we are a massive country with a massive monetary budget that has taken advantage of global politics to put itself forward and advance itself forward. I think this whole idea of superpowers of the world and the number one country in the world or the number one nation in the world is very antiquated, and it's very hurtful because majority of the time we're talking about people that are going to be representatives. Like when we talk about superpowers of the world, it's because we're trying to position a president or a representative of our country to express their power outwardly on a global stage. For what reason, ultimately, you know, I don't know. And this is also something that can be seen like when we talk about like the US and its position on Russia or China, or like, you know, for example, the Communist Party of China. When we talk about the Communist Party of China, I think a lot of people don't realize that China is more than just the military that we see on TV and Xi Jinping, you know. Kind of similar in a way that the US is not just Joe Biden and Kamala Harris and the United States Army. We are a country of more than, I think, 350 million people. We have lots of shades, faces, identities, and makeups and ideas. And it doesn't serve us to be so one-sided and one-dimensional in our perceptions of other people, especially when we want to, like, the US is always going out of its way, I feel like, to make enemies and to, instead of trying to make allies, we criticize and we try to make others down in our attempts to quote unquote reclaim some sort of glory. Like, I don't think we want to go back to the days of the US aiming to be the number one superpower. I feel, wasn't all of the countries trying to vibe to be the number one superpower, didn't that lead to the first two world wars? I really don't feel that we are in a position now where any country is in a position to want to ignite some sort of war. I see it happening all the time that people are talking about, oh, well, we're on the verge of a war with Russia and with China. And I think about the situation with Cuba, and I think about, are the people of Cuba really concerned whether or not socialism is a problem here in the US? Or, you know, if some representatives want to be socialist or identify as democratic socialists, like people like AOC have gone on record and have been identified as democratic socialists. The real experiences of Cuban people are, they want food, they want the ability to move on from this virus, and they want for the police to not harass and be violent with them for protesting and for expressing themselves, and expressing themselves to their government officials and to their people. I mean, the president of Cuba is going on record with the media talking about how the people are saying that they're fighting the government, and how he believes that that's ridiculous because the government is only trying to uplift its people and trying to help it. it should not fall on deaf ears that, this is the same thing that governments experience all over the world. And it should be a reminder to people that it's not the ideologies that get everybody mixed up. It's not a socialism problem. It's not a representational government problem. Most of the time, ideologies are not the issue, because ideologies in concept and in theory are great and they work. But it's when the people have to follow those ideologies and adhere to them, and what the real lived experiences of those ideologies are, is what's messy and what's leads to issues and problems. Sure, in perfect theory, or in a perfect world, a representational government works, but it doesn't work when it was founded on representing only a certain sect of the population. Sure, socialism is a great idea in the sense that everybody is equal, but who gets to decide what equal is and who gets to be equal? Well, yeah, that's a big issue. It's always how it's put into practice that's the issue. It's never the concept itself. And I mean, that was my number one gripe with people taking this as an opportunity to say that, we don't need socialism in the US. It's like, okay, maybe we don't need socialism in the US, but we do need to take heed of what the Cuban people are experiencing and see that we need to do better for them and also for ourselves. And kind of work from that. This is a moment of reckoning. I don't know what the Cuban people see as their future or want as their future. I am 100% in support of whatever the community and the commonwealth, what the citizens want, over what the heads of state think, quote unquote, is best for their country. But I also don't want people to suffer. I would hope that this could be an opportunity for Cuba to open itself to aid from maybe the EU and from other countries, that this could be a way for multiple countries to get involved and start creating better relationships with one another, seeing that a communist or a socialist country can work with a representational government country, a more democratic government, and we can work together, learn from each other, and evolve, and maybe get to a point where we're not trying to one-up another or put another down just to make ourselves feel better. Because in essence, that's what happens. We're trying to kick a country down when its people are experiencing so much, and using it as a talking point to big ourselves up or big up our beliefs in our political party, aka the Republicans saying like, oh, well, what do you want? You want to be like Cuba? It's like, well, if you think about it, in certain parts of this country, certain people experience the same thing that the Cuban people are experiencing. During the height of the COVID-19 pandemic, Black and brown and indigenous people were seeing firsthand the shortage of care and attention and outreach from every facet. They were being affected on every facet that this COVID pandemic hit: the economics, the health, the community, the water. Not only were they under constant oppression before the pandemic only heightened the oppression that they were already experiencing, and their already lack of resources, lack of healthcare, and access to sustainable food sources, all these different things were just exacerbated. And similar to that, in Cuba, the problems that the government, the problems with the government and the problems that the people were experiencing are only being heightened by this pandemic, and they feel that the government isn't doing enough for whatever the reason may be, and they're choosing to protest against it. Similarly to how people in the US protested what was going on in this country and highlighting the need for intervention by the government to help and highlight the people most affected. And I think that's what, the shift of focus should be on. Once again, I think that all of us should come to this moment with compassion and a lot of prayer and empathy for the people of Cuba and for their situation, and hopefully, like I said, something good can come of this, that the people will be released by the police, that the people will be heard, and if they feel that the government's ideas or morale around socialism is what is impeding them from moving forward and fighting this pandemic and all of the different struggles that they are experiencing, and moving away from that and aligning themselves more with a different kind of ideology and restructuring their government, if they feel that that is what they need to move forward, then okay, then yeah, go for it. But if there is a way to maintain their certain structure and that's what they want to do, they just want certain things fixed or adjusted, then I think that's also the place of us to support. I think that we should try to support and uplift the people of Cuba in the way that they are asking for it. So once again, this story is developing and ongoing, and I think that it's important to take this as a lesson, to be appreciative of how far here in the US we have gone. It's also a reminder that it's not over in a lot of parts of the world. This new Delta variant is ravaging through countries and communities, especially in places where the vaccine was not administered on time, and countries that just didn't have access to it to begin with. The US, being such a big player in the world of global politics, positioned itself to have the first and the most of the COVID vaccines. And even still, we find ourselves in a country where people are fighting it for quote unquote conspiracy theories, but you have an entire country uprising because their people are dying from the virus and they feel that their government isn't doing enough to help them. I think I know that that's something that aggravates me. On top of that, we have people using the struggles and the hurt of the Cuban people as talking points to big up ourselves, as if that's not a perfect example of us being privileged, and even on top of that being obnoxious assholes, frankly. So I guess a good way to kind of end this discussion, because I wanted to keep it a little bit brief because I know that this is ongoing and I had a lot of thoughts. I had a whole nother show planned, but I just woke up to all of this and I just felt it pertinent to discuss. With more information going out, we might even get another episode this week, and it might be a little bit different. I'm going to try to stick to the same format that I've had. But I've just been very interested and very compelled and kind of conflicted with my thoughts and my opinions about all of this. So I want to end with my listenership that is here in the US. If you or someone you know has not yet gotten the vaccine and is able to do so, please go out and get it. There are people dying across the world. You may not know people next to you that are going through it and dying anymore, but there are people in this world that are getting sick and are dying and are experiencing hardships that here in the US we don't have to, because we are lucky enough to live in a country that has positioned themselves to where we don't have to experience that. We went through a lot last year and it hasn't ended for a lot of other people. So I think it's important to count our blessings and to be productive members of not just, the US, but also of, what I was talking about earlier. We're all members of the global citizenry, and I think we should do our part. Remember to extend prayers and compassion, and take everything in, not just with a grain of salt, but also with an added layer of compassion and empathy for what people are experiencing across the globe. So yeah, like I said, this is probably something that I'm going to touch on again a little bit later in the week. We will see how things are unfolding. what happens with the EU and different governments across the world and how they come out and react to what is going on currently in Cuba. So yeah, let's keep it rolling and let's move into the last segment of today's episode. So for today's Love That segment, I wanted to talk about live performances, specifically artists that upload live performances or special live performances on their YouTube channel, and like how much they make a difference as far as like when you really love an artist and they upload something like an acoustic version of something. I don't know why, but it just like always takes it to like the next level, and it just like, I don't know, it just brings me back to like a place in middle school when I was like getting songs off of LimeWire, and then I was like moving them into iTunes. I don't know if anybody else remembers, but like you would drag the song from LimeWire and you would drag it into iTunes, and then you would have to like rename it because like the file would be, I don't know, let's just say it was T-Pain Bartender, and so it would say like T-Pain Bartender DJ da mix.com blah 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 blah, and then you would have to like rename it, and then you could put like art, like, you know, the cover on it, and then you would burn the CD. I don't know, it just kind of takes me back to that time. I know I wasn't really into like live acoustic performances, but it just kind of reminds me of that era when I was just like so enamored and like loving somebody's particular music that it made me get to a point where I wanted to like download it for myself, and like, I don't know, it just like brings you back to that nostalgic feel. So I specifically want to talk about a live performance that I recently saw that by a person that does, whenever they do live performances, like I just absolutely love it, and it's Ariana Grande, like duh, right? I don't know if anyone else has recently seen her I think they're called like Vivo live sessions, but if you haven't seen them, they're really good. I think the first one she did was for her song POV, which was really, really good. And then she just released the second one with Ty Dolla $ign, which was Safety Net, which was amazing as well. And then she just stated on her Instagram, or released on her Instagram, that she has 2 more performances coming up. I think I know for sure one of them is My Hair, and then there's another one, but I don't remember which one that one is, but they're all songs off of the latest album, and she's really good about live performances. I mean, being that she is such a great vocalist, of course she is, but she's just very musically inclined. She loves nice orchestras and beautiful arrangements. I can't remember if it was her last album or the album before, when she had like a music special that was like live at the BBC or something like that. But if any of y'all haven't seen that or heard or seen that, honestly, I would recommend looking it up. She had like an entire set list of songs that she performed on the BBC. I think it was the BBC 3 or the BBC 1. I can't remember exactly. But the performances are on YouTube, and she has a whole bunch of different songs that she performs, and it's just, it was so good. Literally, going back to what I was talking about earlier, like, I have all of those YouTube performances. I have all of them saved and on my phone. Like, I downloaded them so that I could save them onto my phone, like on some 2007 LimeWire, iTunes, uploading to your first generation iPod or MP3 player kind of, you know, situation going. I love live performances because obviously it reminds me of concerts, and I really miss concerts. Also, sidebar, really looking forward to being able to go to a concert. I know that a lot of my friends love going to concerts as well. Honestly, I can't think of the last concert I went to. I want to say maybe it was Sabrina Claudio Eek. but the music is good. I know that I know that those who may know who Sabrina Claudio is might laugh at why I'm kind of like, should I say or not say that I went to her concert? But we all know that the music is good, right? But yeah, I think that was the last concert. I can't remember another one after that one, and the ones before that I know were years ago. But yeah, I'm really looking forward to live venue concerts. Artistically, I don't know who exactly I would be like most willing to go to. I would like to see Ariana Grande live, but I would definitely have to go with a group of friends, at least 4 or 5 of us, so that we can, have a little space wherever we're sitting, because it's going to be nothing but 12-year-olds, and I really don't want to fight with them over the best spot to get a picture and their screaming and all that stuff. I don't want it to get in the way of my screaming. But other than that, I'm thinking, I mean, I've never seen Drake in concert, and I've always heard that it's like a really fun, entertaining experience. Oh, you know who would be really, really good? Bruno Mars. Bruno Mars would be so good to see live. That little boy can sing. He can sing his ass off. I would love to see him. He's another one that is really good live. He has amazing performances live. Like the last couple times that he's performed, Leave the Door Open, the arrangements are different, and you can tell that these people know how to sing and are actual singers, because they don't sing the song the same way every single time. They kind of go off based to where their voice is in that moment, which I appreciate. Not only as like a fan, but also as somebody like who can respect that they're taking care of themselves and their instrument. Going back to live performances, my favorite live performances. Okay, I mentioned Ariana Grande's are really, really good. I mean, old school performances. I mean, if you just look up live performances of people, I do it with my family all the time. I mean, I think my mom and my dad can definitely attest to and even my cousin and my aunt and my uncle, I'll always put on the same performances in the background, like when they come over and stuff. When you want background music, I won't go to like Pandora and that kind of stuff. It's too easy. I mean, I'll do it, but I prefer to put on videos on YouTube of live performances and kind of just like shuffle them along. Like, of course, an Ariana Grande performance. One of my favorite ones is Beyonce at the Grammys tribute to Stevie Wonder. When she performed with Ed Sheeran, and who else does she perform with? Oh my goodness, it's gonna kill me that I can't remember. Not Sammy Davis Jr. Duh. Oh my goodness, I cannot think right now. But the Beyonce tribute to Stevie Wonder from the Grammys celebration that they do, because they celebrate an icon like every year before the Grammys. Hers is absolutely iconic. It's like 9 minutes. She does like 3 different songs, and everybody in the audience is like absolutely dying. Stevie is just like beside himself. Another really good one from that exact same night is Lady Gaga's performance. Lady Gaga did a wonderful tribute to Stevie Wonder. Oh my god, it was so good. Oh, so good. Okay, let me think of other favorite performances. I'm trying to think. I feel like I'm like really stunted because I have like so many going out through my brain. I mean, anything Mariah Carey, to be honest. Anything Mariah Carey is like fantastic. Anything Whitney is gonna be fantastic. Anything when you see Whitney with like the rag in her hand, the mic in her left, and you see just that little bit of like perspiration and like dewiness on her décolletage, on her neck, you just know that she was about to like sing you beneath the fucking chair. I'm trying to think of another really good performance. Oh, okay. This is a performance that is like not technically the best performance ever, but it's an iconic moment in pop culture history. All of you should look up Patti LaBelle singing, I think it was A Christmas Carol. And and it was when she messed up and she kept on asking like where her background singers were, and she had the lyrics mixed up, so she kept on telling the person like that they were on the wrong card or they were going too fast. It's just an iconic moment in like media, and I think everybody should look it up. I think I talked enough about some of my favorite performances. I could literally ramble on and on and on and on about all these different moments that I love. But I guess this could be a great opportunity for everyone to once again follow and reach out and interact with me online, like and subscribe and share this podcast, as well as the IG account. Once again, the IG is the Love That Pod on Instagram. So go ahead and like and follow. Trying to interact with everybody. I'm trying to be an Instagram whore and just get everybody following me. So go ahead, like and share. I'm liking everybody's pic. I'm liking the first 12 pictures on everybody's profile that follows. So I'm doing that like for like, very 2010. So go ahead and reach out to me on there. So with all of that being said, we have reached the end of another episode of the Love That Podcast. I want to thank each and every one of you for listening in to another episode. Like and share. Engage with this podcast. Engage with the forum. I want to thank each and every one of you for reaching out. I want to thank everybody for their messages, for liking the podcast, liking the topics, liking the discussions. I want to try to keep the engagement going and up, and just more and more. Like I had said earlier, be on the lookout for another episode of the podcast coming out this week, depending on the developments of Cuba and honestly the world over. There's a lot of things that we can be discussing. Keep a lookout for that. Stay safe. Have a wonderful rest of the week, and I will see you all in the next one. Bye.